Good evening from Vietnam, Susan. Thanks a lot for joining our Inside Sharing show and sharing your stories with our audience. We really appreciate that.
I so appreciate you inviting me. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
How's the weather in Portugal, in Porto now?
Actually, interesting. It's been fall has decided to come seriously. So it's been tons of rain and tons of wind, and it's kind of exciting. But it's still fairly warm. But yeah,
Very
it's
warm.
very windy. I live 5 minutes from the beach, so it's very, very windy on the coast, um, and so that's it. It's just kind of rainy and windy, and it seems exciting to me. I don't know.
As a person who writes, right?
Yeah.
You need a lot of emotion attached to what you do. So whatever the weather, that makes you feel happy, whatever it makes you feel good, enjoy it. Susan, all right?
Yeah.
You want you to be happy.
I think that part of my whole journey was just realizing that the weather's going to be what the weather's going to be, and you might as well find something to love about it. I mean, I guess that applies to everything. Like, this is what we got, so what's good about it? So,
Yep. Make the best out of everything, right?
exactly.
That's the attitude that I always enjoy. And Susan, the show is all about you, and it's gonna be great honor for our audience to have you to introduce about who you are and the work that you do. Would you please do that?
Yes, I will try. I am a writer, so that has meant that I've been on a long and interesting journey of writing different things. And usually it wasn't just choosing what I was going to write, it was more seizing opportunities as they came along. Um, so I started out as a journalist, as a newspaper reporter, and I was did no interest in business when I got out of college, but that was the job they were offering. So I just wanted to be a Luddite hippie, and I don't know what I wanted to be, and write about emotions or something. Anyway, it's a really good thing that I started writing about business because that opened the whole world to me, I think. And I was a business journalist for several years, and then in the 90s when the internet came along and sort of changed the equation for journalism, there were fewer options for me, and I was raising kids for a lot of that chunk of time, and working from home, and then and doing freelance writing, mostly about business, but also about culture. And I mean, it kind of ranged art, everything. And uh, then I moved to Taos, New Mexico, and I got a job as a community liaison for an environmental group, which was very cool and had nothing to do with anything I'd ever done before, except that I was writing newsletters. And I did that. And then I again went back to journalism because I got an opportunity to write more about Taos, which is where I was living. It's Taos, New Mexico is this tiny little town in Southwest United States where it's mountains and deserts and Native American pueblos, and it's got this very storied history, and it's a very quirky, weird place to live, but I loved it. Anyway, so I did that, and then I needed to make a change, and so we moved to Austin, Texas, and that's where I started writing content pretty commonly for companies. And so I went into that whole thing, and then someone hired me to help him write a book about how to change your career. If it was right after the Great Recession, when that kind of in the middle of the Great Recession, and it was originally a book for retired people about how to go back to work if you lost all your retirement money. And then we wrote two other versions of it for lots of different people who also weren't happy with their careers and wanted to change it. So it was Mark Miller's ideas, and I was helping him write it. So I did that. And then I started working with I don't know if you wanted the whole story now. I started working with another person about his book, and that ended up being a 5-year project about his company goes into other organizations and teaches them how to find out what's meaningful about the company beyond just looking at the mission statement, like what's really making people get up in the morning and get to work or not. And so I helped him write that book. And then what? Then I lost my job. We weren't working together anymore. And then I started working for a European wave energy company doing their communication stuff, which I still work with them some, and I love them. And now I'm back working with the guy on the meaningful work thing. So it's just a lot of things. I've also worked for a company that does disaster recovery communications around Puerto Rico and helped build the plan to, this is just because people knew me and they knew my writing, and they hired me to help with create an action plan for Puerto Rico about how to protect the island against future hurricanes and how to rebuild. So I just do cool projects. People come along and they say, hey, we're doing this. And I think, I don't know how to do that. And then I go look it up and then I start helping. So that's what I do.
Hey, Susan, the space for writing is very competitive. There's a lot of people around the world, joining and writing for companies. So it's very competitive market also. How did you make your names standing out so that companies and individuals can look up to you and get you involved into writing for them?
Well, initially, I think it was very helpful that I had worked for publications that had a reputation. So it wasn't me presenting myself. It was me presenting the articles that I'd written. So I had written for the Kansas City Star, which is a major newspaper in the United States. So that gave me the clout to try to write for other publications, and that was very helpful. But then I moved places where people, they still knew the places that I'd worked for, and I think that was always helpful, is just trying to get in there. But then it's about building relationships. So I would get hired by someone. Oh, the first guy I got hired by to write a book in Austin, he had actually hired a friend of mine. And then she couldn't do it because she got a job. So she recommended me just because she liked me and thought I seemed like a pretty good writer. So that's the other thing, is just building relationships, getting to know people, and looking everywhere. I have literally, I don't know, probably 10 places that I will go to look for work when I don't have work, which is, I don't know if I should list them, but some of the places I go is Media Bistro. There are Facebook groups for people who are hiring writers. LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed. You just Google writers wanted, and there's a million places that you can look. Some of them I don't work with because they charge you money for work, and I think I'm not in that space anymore. But it's just network, which is not always easy because I am an introvert. I like to stay home and write and not talk to people. But
Susan, thanks a lot for you being an introvert and decided to to talk to me and to join to the show and sharing your stories. Let's the two introverts, which you are and I am also an extreme introvert myself, and travel in time. I want to travel in time with you. All right. So when I was young, Susan, I want to be an astronaut because as an introvert, I think is traveling to a different planet seems to be ideal for me. Wearing the astronaut suit and jumping to different planet, talk to nobody seems to be perfect, right? Life didn't give me a chance close to that, so I ended up doing something else that I need to also alter my personality, learn how to live with uncomfortability, and it was a hard journey for me, but I'm glad that I can build that strength up. And so when you were young, Susan, what was the younger version of Susan want to be, in the future? Tell us your dream.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, always. I read books all
Always.
the time, always. I'm very fortunate in that. I read books constantly, and I wrote stories for my family for like a Christmas present or something, a birthday present. I would write them a story that was about them or that was about something they liked. Um, when I was in elementary school, my older sister was a reporter at the Kansas City Star before me. I came from a big family. I'm number 7 out of 8 children. So my older sister was a reporter, and she was a reporter for the City Hall. She was the first female reporter for the City Hall. And she would report on behaviors of the mayor and the city council members that the male reporters hadn't reported on. These were sort of antics and bad behaviors that they would do in City Hall. And it made the mayor furious, and he kept trying to get her fired. And that seemed really amazing because she seemed really powerful to me because the mayor of the city was mad at her. So, and then I was always a very good girl. I didn't break the rules or anything. Till later, then high school, I broke all the rules. But I was in grade school, and we put together a newspaper, and I took on the task of interviewing the principal, and while the head of the school, and while all the other kids were asking, what's your favorite color and do you have any pets, I was asking her more complicated questions about teacher strikes and things. And she got mad at me, and she kicked me out of her office. And so normally I felt very quiet and obedient, and I didn't want anyone to be mad at me, but that made me feel so powerful. So I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to be in journalism, because it just seemed like I didn't feel like I had personal power, but I could borrow the power of the newspaper or whatever, and go cause trouble and be brave. And I always thought that I would travel the world as a reporter. But again, I was too scared to do a lot of that stuff. And most of my life has been figuring out what are you scared of and then making sure I go do it. Because
Wow.
because I didn't because one of the things that happened was as a teenager, I'm going way beyond your question. Sorry. That's what I wanted to be. I always wanted to be a writer. I kind of always wanted to be a newspaper reporter. So there wasn't a big shift or surprise in there.
It's just that a writer as the one that create the world, right? If we look back at histories, like a lot of things that we are having now was once imaginations, and these were written by somebody who writes something up, right? So
Yeah.
you have the power with, before they had the power with the pen, now you have a power with your keyboard to create the world the way you want to be. And whatever, we don't know, never know. One day the world would be the way that we wrote about, right? Yeah. So I
Yeah.
envy you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then, yes.
for me, one of the most powerful things was when I was in the U.S. they call it high school. I guess in other places they call it middle school. I wrote obituaries, and for people who had died, and it was a little formula. You couldn't actually talk about the person's personality or anything. It was just kind of where they were born and how many family members they had and what organizations they belonged to. And so this was, one of my first journalism jobs. And it was interesting to me because I saw all these people who had been born and died in the town that I was born in. And I thought, oh my gosh, did they ever do anything? And it gave me this goal in my heart, like that I was not going to live. Like it was just, they were born, And then they got married and they had kids and they belonged to this church and they belonged to that club, and then they died, as far as I could tell. And it was like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to.
And Susan, so it seems really, really odd with person as a very introvert person like you, and then try to identify things that you're afraid, things that you don't want to do, and you're doing that. So how would you be able to tell yourself to get yourself stronger, to face with that, and to look at it, what you're afraid, right straight in the eyes, and do it. Tell us the secret.
Well, I think it's really, and this is going to sound morbid, but it isn't. I think a lot of my experience has been formed by death. And it's like the writing those obituaries made me realize that it was so easy to not do things. It was so tempting. It's so tempting to sit on the sofa and not get up and go outside. It's so tempting to not do the hard thing. And then you can wake up one day and it's over, and you don't have the option to do those things anymore. And I think that the fear of missing out on my life was what I clung to. I clung to the fear of missing it to overcome the fear of whatever it was that had to do to get there. So I wish it was a healthier perspective of, I just filled myself up with good feelings or whatever, but it really wasn't. It was like, if I don't do this, I'm going to be sorry. I'm going to look back and feel like I missed my life. And so, and that, I think that literally, probably almost every day, about lots of things, even little things, like just going for a walk. I live in a beautiful place, but sometimes I can just get lazy and I don't want to leave the apartment. But it's like, if you look back on your life and you didn't do this, you're going to be mad. It's like, okay, I'm going to get up and go.
Susan, saying it is easy, but doing that is not a lot of people doing that also. You see, a lot of people know about that when we old and at our deathbed, right? We're gonna regret a lot of things, and we wish we would, spend a lot more time with the family, do things that we really love to do. Everybody knows that, but not a lot of people can change and do it now. And then, so they let their life carry them into the deathbed and go back to the same cycle of wishing that they had more time and stuff. So I'm happy for you, Susan, that you are able to, at the same time realize that, and having been able to also do something about that. So that space of doing something is extremely important, though.
I think I read somewhere that people in Bhutan meditate on death 3 times a day. And I think that in the West, we don't talk about it. We don't think about it. It's like, whoa, if you start talking about death, people get really uncomfortable. And yet, if we don't talk about death, that's when you just let days slip by and years slip by, because you don't want to think about death. You don't want to think about loss. You don't want to think about regret. And then you end up having them. And I personally think you have to think about death. So I think having written obituaries as my job helped me to do that. And then I've been present at the death of people, especially someone who wasn't even close to me. She was a family member. I was close to her. I was close to her family, but I wasn't personally close to her. But sitting there with her as she spent the last weeks of her life gave me a lot of time to go. I wasn't crying. I wasn't really sad. So I was just sitting and thinking about life and death. And it's like, gosh, if we would think about it and talk about it, not in a morbid way, but as part of being alive. This is just part of it, like the flowers and the trees and everything else. It's part of nature. And say, okay, well, given that that's definitely my destiny, what do I want to do then? So, and I feel like changes your way of thinking. So then you think, gosh, if I'm going to die, do I really care whether I get a new carpet in my living room? Or would I rather spend that money, I don't know, going to Paris? You know, if I'm going to die, how much time am I spending worrying about that, you know, extra tummy or whatever it is people worry about, not having a nice new car? If I'm going to die, maybe just shifts your perspective. But you have to be willing to think about dying. And I talk about, oh my gosh, it drives my children so crazy, especially my daughter. She's like, oh good, we're going to talk about death again. That's my favorite thing. So
Susan, but thanks for bringing that up. I uh, I was once living and chasing the wrong lies. All right, so I worked really hard to get into the top of the corporate ladder, and I worked really hard. And then one day I look back at what we have. I lost a lot of time, you know, with my family, with my daughter. Didn't have a lot of dinner together, and I feel like, you know, whatever that I've been doing, it was good, but it's not something that I wanted to do. I wanted to have, and that's a moment that and it's hard to change also, Susan, because you know you have a team that is relying on you. You have a lot of people expecting you to perform and, you know, to continue the path. And so I can feel what you share in there also.
yeah, that's so hard. And there's an element of it where you have to be very conscious of what you're doing. And then for me, there's a little part where you just have to kind of close your eyes and do it. You kind of close your eyes and jump. You're like, I've decided to do this. I can't ponder it anymore. I'm just going to do it. And it always comes out okay. It doesn't mean you don't have hard parts or you don't have regrets. When I moved to Portugal 3 years ago, I keep reading people who are thinking about moving and they're so worried about it. And I'm like, I promise you, you will regret the decision at times. You know, you just will. You'll look back and go, what did I just do? And that's okay. You just factor that in to the process of moving to a new part of your life. You're always going to have moments when you're like, wow, that was a mistake. But they don't last, probably. I mean, in my case, they don't last. It's just a momentary, what is it called? Buyer's remorse is what they call it. When you buy something and you regret having bought it. So anyway,
Now you have you went to a very beautiful country. Your house is 5 minutes walk from the beach, right? And then you can always see the beach from your from where you live. It's gonna be beautiful, and you also have a chance to interact with you know, the people, the nice people in the world. You know, the people stay there, right? Life's totally different. You know, I think that you made a very good decision to move there.
I
Yes.
totally agree.
Mm. I have two last questions for the conversation today, Susan. The first one is, you've been mentioning the word thinking a lot, all right?
Mhm.
And that is something that my wife and I are fascinating to work on, because we have been look out for ways that can help people to improve their ability to think. In our opinion, our ability to think is diminishing, not increasing. And if we can ask people for their secret source of thinking and share it with people around us, hopefully that can be helpful for the people to improve their ability to think. So, Susan, that boiled down to the question we want to ask you. Um, how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think?
Well, in my case, my work does it for me to a large degree because, for example, I'm working on projects right now that involve corporate sustainability, uh, travel through the multiverse, um, and meaningful work.
Mm.
And none of them have anything to do with each other, and I have to do a lot of research. and learn about them to be able to write about them. So my job helps me. Otherwise, uh, two things. One, I'm just very curious, and I like to learn about things. So I'll like, for learning about the multiverse, which apparently is a valid physics theory based on math. It's not just something that the Marvel Comics universe is doing.
Yep.
I will listen to physicists, and if I don't understand, there are some who are more easy to understand than others, and if I don't understand it, I'll listen to another one and another one and another one to try to get my brain to accept the information. And I was reading this morning, you know, thinking hard makes your brain tired. So you just have to accept that you will be tired. I literally, in learning about this physics stuff, I was surprised because I would get so tired and have to take a nap in the afternoon. And I had just been sitting and reading all day. But your brain uses an enormous number of calories. So I think it's just, I think honestly, a lot of it is being willing to accept the fact that your view of the universe, like your view of the universe, you grew up in Vietnam?
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
My view of the universe growing up in the Midwest is totally different from your view, is totally different from the people in Portugal's view of what is reality and what is the nature of reality. And if we cling to our ideas about, well, this is reality, it's kind of like a person who lives in a small town their whole life and never leaves the town and says, all the world is in this town. So it's just being willing to let something come in and make you be wrong and stretch what you know, stretch what you think. It's really, honestly, when they look at quantum mechanics, which is another whole topic, but the nature of the world is very weird and confusing. So if we start thinking that the world has to fit in these little boxes, and then you look at what the scientists are actually discovering about the nature of the world, there are not little boxes. Nothing stays in little boxes. So you just have to be willing to be wrong, I think, and to be willing to be confused and to always be learning.
Yep. I think that what you say is very important, Susan. Willing to be wrong, willing to be learning, willing to accept, that we are different. Right? We have different world, we have different background, different culture, and what we know is what we know, and it might be right, might be wrong. It's just what we know. So, and then if we can expand our capacity, our space for learning, then perhaps there's a lot of current differences between the lot of like misunderstanding could be solved easier. A lot of challenges that everybody's facing now can be solved in a nice and peacefully way. So and it all start by just realize that what we know is just what we know, right? And there's everything there is like the world out there is so big, so different. So
We can only see through our own filters, our own lenses. They might be wrong. Yeah.
Yep. And so we know your past already. We know the current works that you do. We are jealous with you that you have a beautiful home and of 5 minutes away from the beautiful beach, living in the beautiful city with a lot of amazing people, and your works allows you to be so creative, learning different things at once, to write things uh, in your own way, your own words. So we want to head into the future to end the conversation. All right. Is there anything Susan is working on that you are exciting and you want to share with me and the audience in advance? So together we can celebrate with you now.
I love that. I have two projects that I love dearly, and one is All right, I'm going to say three. I know you only asked me about one. One is the meaning company, which is it's a company called Pathways, and they have for 27 years been teaching organizations how to understand their employees' meaning models. Like we all have our own meaning model. You can't tell someone what is meaningful. And he helps companies understand what their employees find as meaningful and help integrate that with what the company's meaning is. And it's really cool. And he's been doing this for corporations around the world, but now people are finally starting to really understand the importance of meaning. So that's actually his project, but I'm helping him with it. And we're probably going to redo our book about that. And I'm excited about that. Still working with the Wave Energy Company. Wave Energy is the most powerful form of natural resource. It's sea-based, is one of the wave energy companies that is happening out there, and it's the most powerful natural resource in the world. And I hope that that starts taking over instead of fossil fuels. So that's something I'm excited about. And the other thing is just I really need to start writing creatively. That's the big fear I'm facing right now. Is I can write for anybody else, and I'm fine. Once I start writing my story or start writing creatively or start writing fiction or poetry, that's when all the fear comes up. And, oh no, this is me. I can't show myself. So that's the other thing I need to work on. But that's, yeah.
I wish you had all the best, all the resources you need, all the support and the love that give you the energy for you to complete all the things that you wanted to do. All right. So Susan, thanks a lot for spending your afternoon joining our shows and sharing your stories. My wife and I are working on our book writing together, and this is going to be the first time that we write a book together about a topic of thinking. You know, like we asked you earlier, because we've been asking this topic for 400 plus people, expert like you are, about how they think, how you think. And then we start to see the pattern of the thinking, across all the experts. So we're gonna write that book together. When we do that, we're gonna ask you for some advices of how we're gonna construct the book and stuff like that. And we want to hear expert opinion from you. All right? Would you be willing to help us with that?
Of course, that's such an exciting project. I love that. I love that. Thinking it's actually really fun, but it's hard too. So
And
learning to
in that book, we're gonna mention about you sharing the story about how you think also. You know, like through multiple projects that you do, and at once we have you to do a lot of research, a lot of listening, a lot of reading, so that it can it can help to expand your ability to think, to write that. And the you know and I am really excited to that opportunity to share your works to the world also. All right.
well, thank you very much. So
It's a pleasure to knowing you. And if we ever travel to Porto, we'll let you know. We'll let you
yeah,
know, definitely. Sure.
come to Portugal. You have to come to Porto. It's a small country. Come on. So
Yep,
okay.
definitely we come. We have a lot of good friends in Portugal, so definitely we travel
Oh,
there.
okay, great. All right.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I
yeah.
look forward to meeting you.
Yep, me too. Hey,
Thank
Susan, I need to go now, so I wish you all the best. And if you travel to my country, do the same. Let us know. We're gonna welcome you. We're gonna take you around town. Okay?
you. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Have a good
Thank you.
afternoon. No, wait. Good evening.
Good
Okay.
evening. Good afternoon to you. Enjoy the weekend. Also, enjoy the
Okay.
weekend to
You
you.
too.
Okay.
All right.
Bye
All
bye.
right.